Hey everybody, we just want to let you know that Aaron West invited us to be on his podcast, Criterion Now. So if you guys want to go over there and check it out, we had a great time doing it, and we think that you guys would enjoy it.
Yeah, we had a lot of fun. We talked about Barry Lyndon, talked about a lot of Criterion news, and yeah.
And we're not going to get to Barry Lyndon for quite some time, so go ahead and see what we had to think about it now while you can over the podcast.
But yeah, go check it out and listen to all the episodes. It's a great podcast, Criterion Now.
Yeah, and we just want to make sure we thank Aaron West for having us on. We appreciate it a lot.
Yep. All right, on with the show.
Hello and welcome to Casually Criterion. My name is Chris.
And my name's Justin. And this is our first episode that we have dubbed the off-week episodes. Previously, this podcast, every week, we were going through the Criterion Collection one spine at a time. Now we're going to be doing the Criterion films every other week, and our episodes in between are going to be the off-week episodes in which we kind of just talk about movie news and what's on our minds in regards to film. It can kind of really be anything, just kind of open topic. And if you want to subscribe to the podcast and see what's going on, follow along, you can follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/casuallycriterion podcast. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Casual Criterion. And if you want to talk to us directly, give us any feedback, whatever, you can email us at casuallycriterion@gmail.com.
Yeah, and today's episode, we're going to start off with some movie news. Then we're going to do a little bit more of an in-depth Star Wars Episode 8 review. And then we're going to do our top 3.
Okay, well, let's get into movie news. First up, the big news this week is 21st Century Fox has officially been purchased by Disney.
Yeah, this is the big one. I think this means that Disney movies are going to the Disney movies will make up 1/3 of all movies that come out every year now.
Goodness.
Yeah, that's a lot. We talked about this a little bit before on a previous episode, but how do you feel about the purchase?
It's still, I guess, a little weird to me to have so much under one umbrella. It's probably not that close to Monopoly stage because there's so much film production going on and film production companies. And I guess there's exciting things for some people to get excited about, the X-Men and Fantastic Four joining them. There's some other franchises that Disney has now. I think they have The Simpsons now, right?
Yeah, they own The Simpsons. Yeah.
What are the other ones? Alien is one of the other big ones?
So I am going to start a petition that we make the aliens a Disney princess.
A Disney queen?
The younger ones would be the princess.
Oh, okay, that's true.
So, yeah.
The little, yeah.
So I feel like we should market these toys as Disney princesses now, right?
Okay, I'm in. I'm in. I think one of the interesting things that I read about this is that with this purchase, Disney owns a majority of Hulu now.
Yeah, which is actually somewhat disconcerting as well because, NBC puts their stuff on there. So what's going to happen to Hulu? And then the other thing is Disney's is going to have their own streaming service. So are they going to still want Hulu around? I'm sure it'll still make money because it's probably two different things. But, it's disconcerting.
Yeah, I guess it's weird to own a majority share of a streaming service that you're eventually going to be competing against. So I don't know if that will eventually bring about the end of Hulu or if somehow Disney's planned streaming service will conjoin with Hulu. Will Hulu have a Disney channel and they'll keep under the Hulu name, that sort of thing? I don't know. It'll be interesting, and I think it's worth watching to see what happens. But I guess on a more positive note, like you said, the Aliens franchise being part of it, it's we could get more stuff at the Disney parks and stuff, alien monsters running around, or a special section that's maybe a little not as kid friendly, where you have aliens and alien rides and maybe more, I guess, like superhero sort of stuff, and they maybe be a little grittier, maybe not.
Yeah, I think it's it's in my fantasies, it's just X-Men and Marvel are going to be all together. It's all under one umbrella now, and we're going to get crazy, awesome combinations of movies. But I think ultimately it's not a good thing. Mainly, just because they're merging, there's so many duplicate jobs, so a lot of people are going to lose their job over the next few weeks. So yeah, I'm not sure that it's a great thing. It'll be cool for X-Men and the Marvel movies to be together, but ultimately, I like the competition, and I think it would have been better if this had not happened.
Yeah, we'll keep an eye on it.
Yeah.
All right, and next bit of news: the Ready Player One trailer has come out recently, and also alongside a poster. Did you get a chance to look at the poster?
No, I did not.
Yeah, there's like a lot of criticism about the design on the poster because it's like the main character climbing up like a pole with like rungs, like a ladder sort of, but they tried to do like a weird perspective thing, and basically like his leg looks like it's about 2 to 3 times as long as his other leg. Like he's got this like freakishly long leg, and there's a lot of fun that's been had on the internet with people making some fun photoshops.
Did you see the Tomb Raider?
Yeah.
She has this weird like raptor neck when she's looking over. Yeah. You think that they could get those posters to be a little bit better. Like, this doesn't look good, so maybe we should fix it, right?
You'd think, and I guess it's probably one of those things where you're looking at something for so long that you kind of become blinded to it, and you need those outside perspectives. And I guess on something like Ready Player One or Tomb Raider, you probably have so many back and forth, so much like revisions and stuff that like, I don't know, you probably just lose sight of certain things like that. And I think with the Ready Player One poster, it's a little bit more forgivable because it looks like they were trying to do a weird perspective thing with like where he's at, but then like the rest of the image doesn't really match up with that. So maybe they just started tweaking other things. Not that it matters. It's just, it's really funny.
Yeah.
You should look up some of like the Photoshop memes of it because it's pretty entertaining. But we can talk about the trailer. What did you think?
I think it looked fun. I'm always down for Steven Spielberg. Anything. It looks very animated. There's basically 2 films, one animated and then the one outside the virtual reality. Have you read the book?
I haven't actually. After watching the trailer when it released, I guess maybe 5-6 days ago, however long it was, a week ago, whatever. I went and bought the book because I was intrigued by the trailer. I didn't really know the concept. I'd seen the book around, but I didn't really know what it was about. And once I kind of saw it being like a video game or growing up with like video games, like I got like a Nintendo for like my 5th or 6th birthday, 4th birthday, something like that. And I've just gone like every console as they've come out and like kind of been there for most of the development of like video games, with the exception of like Atari, although I did play Atari because that was around when I was a kid. But so this sort of like video game concept intrigues me, and then seeing all of like the pop culture references in there, like where I've gotten to the book so far, basically the guy who created this whole virtual reality Oasis thing grew up in the 80s.
Right.
So he filled like the whole game with like 80s pop culture. And that's why, like, if you watch in the trailer, if you're looking around, there's like at one point Chucky
right
is in it. And then like in a previous trailer, I don't think it's in this one, there's like Freddy Krueger pops up at some point. But there's a lot of reference to like John Hughes films and
right.
It's fun.
Yeah, it's definitely 80s, chock full of, which is interesting with Steven Spielberg directing it, because so it's him directing a movie about nostalgia created by him.
Yeah.
I find that really interesting. But I don't think that there's going to be a lot of like Steven Spielberg references. I think in the book there are a lot more, but I think I read an article where they're not going to do, because it'd be weird for Steven Spielberg to be commenting on his own stuff. The DeLorean's in there.
Yeah, which is Spielberg produced?
Yeah,
Back to the Future?
it is produced. You know, I'm not actually sure how I feel about this movie. I mean, I'm always down for a Steven Spielberg movie, and I'll watch it, but I'm not sure how excited I am.
Yeah, it seems like something that could easily be really, really awful.
Yeah, it kind of almost just be up its own butt. You know, like...
Yeah, it's certainly something that's happened with the book so far, reading it. Like, I'm probably 60, 70 pages in, and there's been a few times where I'm like, okay, chill it with, like, the references, because it's kind of turning into just, like, look how many references I can spout off in a single paragraph.
Yeah.
It just annoyed me from time to time in the book, and I could see that happening in the movie, although I doubt the movie gets into any point where it's just rattling off pop culture references. It's probably stuff that's like in the background for you to notice.
Right.
I think it might work better as a movie. Yeah. Any other thoughts on Ready Player One?
No, I'm excited. We'll see what happens.
Anything in the trailer that like specifically you saw and were like, yeah, that's great? Because that's kind of what the trailer's meant to do, I think.
No, I don't. The trailer didn't get me any more excited than I already was. I think I'm still on that. Like, I'm hesitant about this movie. I'm excited because it's Steven Spielberg, but I'm hesitant. I'm a little worried that it's not going to be Steven Spielberg quality.
Yeah. I think the thing that got me most excited was in the previous trailer, where Freddy Krueger was in there for a second, because I just think that guy's funny.
Yeah.
All right. Let's move on to the third and final news segment, and this is something that's, I guess, probably a little controversial depending on your politics and political views, but we wanted to talk a little bit about net neutrality, as it's been like a big deal in the news, and I guess specifically it impacts potential film stuff with all like the film streaming websites like Netflix and Hulu, and there's a potential impact on it, and I think it's worth discussing. And the news is that the FCC voted to repeal net neutrality. And Chris, do you want to explain what net neutrality is?
Yeah, net neutrality basically allows. It's the government regulating the internet service providers, the ISPs. Like, they have to treat all websites fairly. They can't like if Comcast is part of Netflix, they can't allow the Netflix streaming to go a lot better than they do the Hulu, because they're not part of Hulu, right? So they don't show favoritism to one website over another. It's supposed to keep it a level playing field.
Yeah, they have to give them the same amount of bandwidth,
right,
and the same amount of priority.
Yeah. And
so it seems sort of like a no-brainer idea in that regards of like, you wouldn't want to, if you were a fan of Hulu, but you had to have like Comcast internet, because in a lot of places you don't necessarily have your wide variety of internet providers. Like most places I've lived before I moved here to Houston, I have had one option.
Right.
And if that option is in partnership with Netflix, but I prefer Hulu or I prefer Filmstruck, that's not very cool for me, because they've slowed down Hulu, they've slowed down Filmstruck, and are prioritizing Netflix. But like, that doesn't do me any good. But what are some of the arguments like for net neutrality? I think it's important, like when something seems like this obvious and like obviously good, you should really focus and read on like the arguments against it, right?
Yeah, both sides. We need to know both sides in order to make an informed decision. And especially in something like this, you go on the internet to look up both sides. It feels like the internet is mostly for net neutrality, so it can be hard to find, an argument against it.
But what have you found? So are there anything?
Yeah, so a couple of the reasons why, and I'm not sure how I feel about. So innovation. So people are putting money into the internet, but if you can't, I guess if you're not able to make more money off the internet, then why are you like? you're not going to invest as much. So like if you don't have a way of making as much money back from your investment, then you're not going to be investing in it, which would stymie innovation because you're not investing money into it. So that would be a negative for net neutrality. I'm not sure that I agree with that point, but that is an argument.
Yeah, I think it comes down to, I guess, what economic system you believe in, and I don't necessarily want to get into that, but it does come down to like sort of the idea of a free market, that when companies can do things to up their profit, that leads to a better product for the consumer, because they're going to make their product better and better to try to, encourage you to spend money on them and up their profits, right? Like if your profits are limited, you don't have that much motivation, right?
Right.
But also, I guess there is some worry that it does lead to a more expensive cost for the consumer, right? That like there's a concern that if a company decides to discriminate against Hulu and Filmstruck versus Netflix, to stick with that example, like what that company could end up doing is like, well, if you want your Hulu and your Filmstruck to be better and on their same plane as Netflix, you need to pay this like $5 a month add-on to speed up your Hulu and Filmstruck, right? And that's where, as the consumer, on a consumer level, that's some of the concern of what can happen, is that it's going to end up being more expensive. We're going to have to pay for like whatever chunks of the internet we prefer.
Right. And I think innovation on the internet is still going to happen whether with net neutrality in place. There's so much money, I think, to be made from the internet and is being made let's even get, as opposed to Netflix and Filmstruck, let's just talk about Amazon. Like, what if there is a startup company that's going to go up against Amazon? Amazon's giant, or like eBay versus Amazon. So what if eBay is allied with Comcast and Amazon's not? Like, I just want to go shopping, and Amazon's so slow, so I have to go to this other one. Like that's. Or even our podcast here, how does this affect us?
Yeah, for some reason we're talking about some film that, I'm probably going to use an extreme example here, but like if we're talking about some film that maybe has some sort of like anti-American values to it, right? Like somebody could listen to that part and be like, this podcast is not great. And maybe whatever company we're in is like, let's limit the bandwidth available to like listen to this podcast, right? Like I think it does open up spots for corporations and internet service providers to be able to control what you're seeing and what you're hearing, and I think that's not a good thing. I'm not for that. Something that's interesting about net neutrality is that it feels like a thing that would have been around for a while, but it's only been around since I think 2014, right? Like,
right. It hasn't. It's only been 2 years.
Yeah, that's when net neutrality was enacted. So, prior to this point, the internet has been innovating because it's been new, and I guess that's something I don't understand. Is that prior to net neutrality, there was innovation, and there was a relatively fair internet as far as we know. But I think right when it started to become an issue is when they enacted net neutrality. Like there started to be cases of like a certain company partnering with Netflix so that Netflix runs faster or whatever. So I don't know. I guess it being new and then going away so quickly, I don't know that we've had a fair enough time to evaluate whether or not innovation can still happen under net neutrality.
Yeah. So prior to net neutrality, it wasn't an issue. And so that's kind of the argument about repealing it, is that we had the internet for 10 years before it and it wasn't a problem. But you're right. There were cases of it becoming a problem right before. Small, I think that they weren't very large yet. But I don't necessarily want the companies to make those decisions for me, I think. So
Yeah. And I think it's just something to keep an eye on. I don't think it's official. I think
You still have to go through some more hoops.
Yeah, before it's officially repealed, it's got to do a little bit more, pass a few more votes and stuff. But it's something to keep an eye on, and I guess like read up about it and figure out your opinion and let people know, because it feels really important. Like either way, like whatever happens is pretty significant. So I think it's worth like reading up on, getting educated, and voicing your opinion about it.
Absolutely.
Right. Cool. Well, you ready to talk about Star Wars?
Yes, I am ready to talk about Star Wars. What we're going to say is, spoiler alert. This is the one time that I've said it where I feel like it's a legitimate reason to say it. We're just going to spoil from the start. So if you haven't seen it, go ahead and stop now. Go to the theater, watch it, and come back and listen to the podcast.
Yeah, we're going to get very spoilery.
Yeah.
Cool. So yeah, I saw the movie on Thursday on opening night. I saw it here in Houston at the IMAX, and I saw it in 3D.
How was the experience on the IMAX and 3D?
The IMAX seemed cool because it was a large screen. The 3D I did not like. I thought it was kind of difficult to focus my eyes sometimes. And I think that might actually be the combination of IMAX plus 3D, is that it was so big and I could like my eyes could like move around to look at different parts of the screen. I actually think it might have been more tolerable on a smaller screen, but like even during the trailers, I was like struggling to like see some of the 3D stuff that was going on. It was kind of distracting.
How close were you to the screen?
I was actually in the back row.
Okay. So not very close.
So not as far away as you could be without like standing behind the back row in the back of the room. And I don't want to get too much into the discussion of 3D, but I do think that 3D generally doesn't look very good. Like it kind of looks flatter to me than some 2Ds. Like it's supposed to add depth, I guess, but like you end up to me with like very flat defined planes of depth, and we're accustomed to watching 2D films, and if the cinematography is done well and done right and the film shot well, like you have that depth in there already.
Yeah,
and it looks a little more natural.
That's the deep focus from Kurosawa. You know, like the 3D is in the picture already. You know, for a lot of but we don't have to get into that topic.
Sure.
Maybe that's one for later.
Did you see it in 2D or 3D?
2D.
Okay, I want to see it again in 2D. I'll say that even if I hated the film, I would definitely go see it again in 2D just because my 3D experience was so weird and I didn't like it.
Yeah. I actually went to a place called Star Cinema Grill, and it's pretty cool. It's kind of like an Alamo Drafthouse. The only problem is, like, it was during a major action sequence, and they were like went in front and they were like picking up the plates. They were like clearing, like you would at a restaurant or whatever. But they're clearing, like, just leave the plates there, please. Don't pick it up during the movie. Like, you can wait till after the movie to pick the plates and stuff up. It's bad enough that they have to do the checks and stuff. But I think Alamo Drafthouse does that a lot better. And maybe Star Cinema Grill's new, so maybe they're still learning. But yeah, that is no good.
Mistake.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess so. Before we get into specifics, do you want to give like your overall thoughts? Like, what did you think?
So my expectations, I think, were pretty high for this film. Rian Johnson being part of it, and I was really worried that I wasn't going to like it. And I have some quibbles with it, but overall, really good. Really, really good.
Yeah, same. My thoughts on it are, I guess, to rank it, like I liked it more than Force Awakens for the most part. There are some things in it I liked less than other things I liked in Force Awakens, and the way I've been kind of talking about it is that I thought the film had some really high points and really low points. And if you've listened to previous episodes of the podcast, we talked about Marvel superhero comic movies, and we talked about how they've kind of serviced themselves to like the least common denominator or greatest common denominator.
The greatest they want to
Yeah.
let as many people, like, they kind of take out the personality of it because they want as many people to like it.
Yeah, they play possible. They play it super safe so that, you know, the films can't really be any better than a 7, can't really get any worse than like a 4. They're just really, really safe films, and I find that really boring. So like, I was really into like all the things that they did that were like kind of unexpected, and they provided really high points. Like, there were things in the film that I would give like a 10 out of 10 of like how much I enjoyed certain moments and certain scenes and sections of the film. And then there were, you know, bits of it that I would give like a 2 out of 10 because like I really hated it and didn't like it, or thought it was really weird or bad or whatever. And like, I really appreciate that. And for that reason, I think it's better than Force Awakens. I feel like Force Awakens was a little bit safer, which is understandable given the hate of like the prequels.
Right. I think so. In Force Awakens, what they needed to do was they're like, it's basically a retread. And I think that was the right move for them because they're like, we are returning to the roots. This is the first movie since Disney had bought Lucasfilm. So they wanted to let everybody, we know what Star Wars is. Even if it's very similar to the Episode 4, we want you to know that we can make one. And this is, Rian Johnson got to do the departure, like where he can kind of do what he wants. And
yeah, that was my thought on the Force Awakens when it came out, because so many people were bashing it for like, this is a retread. They've done all this before. They gave us another Death Star, which is to be fair, true, right? But my whole philosophy on it was that they basically put everything into the Force Awakens that was great about the original trilogy, right? Like we had a Death Star, we had a hero from like a desert planet who had force powers. We had a scene in like a cantina bar with like a bunch of shady characters. We had someone revealing that they were someone else's father, right? Like you literally had like the greatest hits of like the original trilogy was The Force Awakens.
Right.
And they got it all out of the way. So really, there's no excuse for them to retread any of that territory.
No, yeah. They need to kind of now they need to move on and make their own trilogy, you know?
Yeah, which I think they did pretty well. I guess there were some retreads in here. I think like the beginning of the movie is a lot of Rey on the planet with Luke and like her training. And
yeah, I would actually say while this doesn't feel like a retread like The Force Awakens was, it's still basically Empire Strikes Back when you look at all the plot points. So we just made a lot of but yeah, it's except for because you have the battle on Crate at the very end, and that's the battle on the snow planet. We have Cloud City, which is the casino segment, and then we have
it's flip-flop around. The snow planet was at the end in this one,
and I think they kind of put things on their ear, like to change it up a little bit and make it a little bit different. But it felt very different from Empire Strikes Back, where I don't think Force Awakens felt that different.
No, and they took it some places that I didn't think it was going to go. Yeah. Like, I actually thought the movie was going to end a couple of times before it did.
I thought the movie was going to end. Luke Skywalker was walking out to face the army.
Yeah,
and I thought
there's a shot behind him.
Yeah,
where he's looking with like you can see all the AT-ATs in the big cannon, and the sun's like setting, and he's just standing there looking.
And I was like, "Oh,
cool!
Is this the end of the movie? Are they really gonna?" I thought that was the end. And
so did I. And everybody I watched it with thought the same thing. They were like, "Oh, the movie's gonna end here on this like huge cliffhanger, and we're gonna open up the episode 9 with like going right into this battle," which I would have been on board with if it had ended there. I would have thought that was pretty cool. But they go even further, you know, and before that they actually get to like what is like Return of the Jedi from the original trilogy. Rey and Kylo end up going into like Snoke's chamber and having like that big showdown, which is kind of from Return of the Jedi, but that happened a film earlier.
Yeah. All right, let's kind of dive in a little bit more. Like we can hit so the opening sequence, like the opening battle. What did you think about that?
I thought it was good. I really liked everything that happened with Poe in that.
General Hux was pretty good talking to Poe, you know.
yeah, I just as a character like Poe getting gung-ho about
he's kind of the Han Solo, right?
Yeah, getting gung-ho about like we've got to destroy the ship at and doesn't think long term. He thinks like short term, like we can take out the ship now, but like then they've lost all of their bombers like in the process, right? And I thought it was exciting. I thought it was fun. It had some like kind of unexpected moments in it, like and unseen before, I guess, like all of those bombs, like when like I love the shot where you see like, okay, these bombers, and it opens up and you see a few bombs and the camera like pulls back or like up and you see that there's like probably like 500 bombs on this one ship, just
right.
like that reveal was really cool.
Yeah, and that whole sequence where she's trying to release the bombs, I thought was really good too.
I don't really remember the order like specifically, but
right.
From there we kind of move on and see a lot of Rey and Luke. I guess let's just talk about that. Like Rey and Luke's training segment, which is reminiscent of Yoda and Dagobah. Right.
So we've had 2 years since we saw The Force Awakens, and at the very end of Force Awakens, you see her handing the lightsaber to Luke Skywalker, right?
Yeah.
And so we've had 2 years to think, what happens next? Now, in any of your fantasies, him throwing the lightsaber over his shoulder, was that ever an idea that crossed your mind?
No, I don't think so. I thought he would maybe not accept it and be like, get out of here, leave. I don't want anything to do with that. And we might like struggle for a while to see him like actually take the lightsaber. And I thought like the moment he takes the lightsaber might be when they've convinced him to like join the fight again. But no, he just grabs it immediately and like tosses it over his shoulder, almost off the cliff. Like I guess I see why they would need it, but like it would have been real funny if it had just gone off like right into the ocean and been lost forever.
That was pretty awesome.
Yeah, there's a lot of humor built from Luke and on that training planet.
Yeah, he's Yoda,
which surprised me,
right? Like essentially, he's the Yoda of this movie. So like he's training her, and so he's got to have some comic relief.
Well, he doesn't want to train her for a while, right?
Right.
Like there's a lot of it where he's refusing to train her, but she says like, no, train me, or you've got to come help.
Yeah.
And we get a lot of kind of goofy stuff with him. And I guess one of the points that I want to talk about it and see what you thought was the scene where he goes and he milks that creature and drinks from like the milk immediately.
Yeah. I didn't have a problem with it until that creature looks over at Rey and is just like embarrassed. He's like, he does this every day. You know, like the creature looked really sad about it. At least that's just my.
It's this sort of gross out humor that is really maybe the only point of that sort of humor in the film, and I kind of got a little bit of a vibe from it of going to like the Phantom Menace and the prequel trilogies is like in the pod racing scenes. There's a bit of like fart humor that involves Jar Jar Binks, and it's to me a little like distasteful and a little out of place. And I felt that way about this thing, and I think I boiled it down to like the big issue is the posture of that creature, because there's something just like weirdly inappropriate about the way that it's sitting just like on its back, lean back, like with its teats like pointed like right out, like ready to be grabbed. Like I can watch a cow or a goat or something that's on all fours being milked and there's nothing like weird about it, but that the way it was just sitting was just like, I don't know, it was really weird. I don't know. That was one of those things, and there are other points of humor in the movie that I wasn't too keen on either, but we can get into those. Was there anything else that
an interesting thing? So she talks to him, and he's like trying to get him to join the war, the resistance, and he's like, "What do you want me to do? Go face down the entire the First Order army?" And of course, by the end of the movie, he does.
Sure. And Luke's sort of disenfranchised with the whole Jedi thing, it seems like it, and some of that's born out of bitterness as we find out like what happened with him and Kylo Ren, and what he was doing, but
he's cut off completely from the Force, right? He has no connection to it anymore.
Yeah, he said so at some point it comes out that he shut himself off to the Force.
Yeah.
But he sort of seems demystified with all the Jedi stuff, which, you know, this is our first time seeing him really, other than the very end of Force Awakens, you know, since the Return of the Jedi, and where he was like a Jedi master and super powerful. And to see him like basically denouncing everything everything that the Jedi stood for. Like, he was kind of like, the Jedi is a bit of a hokey religion. The Force is everywhere. You don't have to be a Jedi to like get in with the Force, which is a different stance and kind of made me think of it differently. Do you think that's him being upset and like grieving, or do you think that he's kind of discovered that you don't have to be a Jedi to like get in with the Force?
So Yoda shows up and Yoda destroys all the Jedi memorabilia, the books, right? And Luke is upset. So I don't think he's necessarily given up completely. I think you're right. He's disenfranchised, but destroying the books made things. He was genuinely upset when Yoda destroyed them.
I don't know if you noticed this, but in that scene, Yoda says like, or the girl, when it's burning, and Luke is like, the Jedi texts are in there, and Yoda says there's nothing in that temple that the girl doesn't already have.
Right.
And like, which you think like, oh, like she's got all the mental characteristics that she needs. She's not going to learn anything from the textbooks. But you find out later, like when one like quick shot towards the end of the film is that she had already taken the textbooks.
Oh, did she?
Out of, yeah. It's like one shot as she like opens a drawer to put something in a drawer, and all the Jedi texts are right there. So it was this little like funny, you think back on that line of like the double meaning there.
Yeah. That's the Yoda's last lesson to Luke, you know. That was kind of cool, you know, like, anyways. So Luke is training Kylo, right? And Luke is, you know, a very strong, powerful Jedi. But the Force is all about balance, right? So was Kylo going evil a reaction to Luke being so powerful? Like, so then they have to create something that is the juxtaposition. So it's just going to be a never-ending cycle of this, you know, bringing up a good person and then making another bad one, or vice versa, as Rey being a reaction to Kylo, you know. Yeah,
that's an interesting thing that they brought up about the Force, and a concept that hasn't really been there before, and maybe the most interesting thing that happened in this film to me.
It's kind of rewriting the whole midichlorian thing, right? Like, let's never talk about midichlorians again.
Sure, yeah, which I'm fine with.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't want it to be a scientific thing. I definitely want it to be a sort of faith-based, religious, metaphysical thing. I don't want science involved with my Force. But yeah, it's so. Yeah, the balance of the Force is something that's been talked about in all the other films. Like, I think Anakin was supposed to bring balance to the Force, right? And
maybe he did. I mean, if we look back, he did by destroying the Jedi. You know, like, so you have the Jedi that were so powerful, and so they needed to be destroyed in order for balance to be a thing.
Yeah, it's an ebb and flow between the dark and the light. And yeah, like, I mean, I think that's an interesting theory that the reason Kylo turned and the dark grew in him so much was because the Empire had been defeated, and there were new Jedis being trained and brought up, and Luke was a Jedi Master, right? And like maybe the most powerful person in like the universe, and that's got to counteract to it. Which I don't know, I guess I really, really like the idea that it's not finite, and there's never going to necessarily be an end to the battle between light and dark. It's always gonna come and go.
And it makes too much money for there to be an end.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, and so I guess we find out what happens with Luke and Kylo. We have the flashback, and we actually get into a bit of a Rashomon type situation to bring this back to Criterion a little bit. We get 3 different stories of what happens, and I guess
what was the third one? So we get Kylo's version.
We get Luke's original version, we get Kylo's version, and then we get Luke's version with a little bit more truth to it. So I guess it's not quite 3 versions. It's like 2.5 versions. Okay. So yeah, in Luke's original version, he just says that Kylo attacked him and burned down everything. And then we hear Kylo's version where he woke up and Luke was about to kill him. Yeah. And so that's why he attacked and then burned down and turned to the dark side. And then we get Luke's version where he says, where he
sensed the darkness in him.
He sensed the darkness in him, and in a moment of weakness pulled out his lightsaber while Kylo was sleeping. And then as he shuts his lightsaber off to like not go after him, that's when Kylo has like already woken up and seen him with his lightsaber drawn. So it seems like maybe a bit of a misunderstanding and a weakness on Luke's point. So I guess both Kylo and Luke's stories are true, but they have slightly different perspectives.
Yeah. And I thought that was really interesting, and the idea that Luke would kill one of his students was dark and disturbing in a good way.
Yeah, and I guess the last thing that I really want to talk about with Rey and Luke on the planet is the whole connection that starts happening with her and Kylo Ren, which is something we haven't seen before in the Star Wars universe, right? Like we've had moments of two people being able to like kind of communicate in their heads, like at the end of Empire when Luke is hanging onto that antenna on the bottom of the Cloud City. He calls out for Leia, and she's on the Millennium Falcon, and she kind of hears him, and then they go find him.
I always felt more that it wasn't necessarily that she heard him, but she felt it in the Force, and she knew that Luke needed help, type of thing.
Yeah,
it's like an emotional response.
Yeah,
I guess it's kind of the same thing, but
yeah, and here we have them actually being able to see each other in like their physical surroundings, which is something new, and I don't know if that's just speaks to Snoke's power, because we find out that Snoke was the one that
was
developing this connection between them.
But then it happened afterwards, didn't it? After Snoke had died?
They still had the connection, I think. Okay. I think he establishes the connection.
And then it's always there.
But then it's there. But I don't know, did you have any thoughts on that? Anything?
Yeah, I think we see two things that we hadn't seen anybody do before in the powers, and we'll talk about the other one later as we get to it. But yeah, I didn't have a problem with either one of them, but I think it's always dangerous to introduce like a new power, like especially if it's plot driven. Like if you're creating a new power just to further the plot, oftentimes like that can feel cheap, I think.
Yeah, and I think Star Wars fans tend to be a little bit a little picky about what they like and don't like, and I think it's a risky move, and that's one of those things where I was talking about. They took a risk by introducing some new elements to the Force that weren't there before, and that sort of thing, as we saw with the prequels, generates a lot of hate.
Yeah,
or can very easily. So I think it was a kind of a risky move.
Well, it's like R2-D2 in the prequels. All of a sudden, he has rockets, and I'm okay with it. But like, he has rockets. Like, why doesn't he have rocket? When you watch the original trilogy, you're like, well, why didn't he fly around then? There's not necessarily, that's not a great explanation. Maybe that's just a problem with doing the prequels. You can do it afterwards, and he's been upgraded.
Yeah, but it doesn't work going from prequel to original because, that makes sense. Doesn't he doesn't have rockets in... oh, no, I was thinking of it in Return of the Jedi. I was like, he does something to help Luke, but he launches the lightsaber to him. And I guess it's something you can do, or something they're doing with like BB-8. It seems kind of like he has like an infinite number of like things inside of his body. It seems like at this point, anything they do with him, he can do. And
yeah, he's a Swiss Army knife. You just need to flip out the right utensil, and he can...
Exactly. And speaking of that, actually, I thought the whole scene in that opening battle where he has to like fix the ship is amazing. Like it's a really good bit of silent comedy,
right?
And slapstick comedy, which is one of my favorite genres. Like I love Keaton and Chaplin and all of that stuff. So like I just was really into that whole bit. I thought it was great. But moving back to their connection, the one thing that happened that was super interesting to me, and they didn't necessarily bring it back around yet or pay it off. I think maybe in some ways they might have, but I have a bit of a theory about that, which we'll get into later. But I might be wrong. But the one time where they were connected and Rey was in the rain and Kylo was not, and when they come out of it, Kylo like looks at his hand and his glove, and there's rain on his glove, right? Which it sort of establishes not just this connection where they can see each other, but there is some sort of physical connection and physical ramifications. Physical ramifications, and I think later on they like touch each other, which is maybe how it pays off. But that's not. I want a little bit more from that, I think, or maybe it's one of those things that's better to like let me think about.
Do you think those connections are like a love story? You know, like they're kind of falling in love. How did you read it that way?
Well, kind of, but I was also wondering if we were going to find out that like Rey's parents were Leia and Han too, or something like that. And I was like, they're going to end up being family at some point. So I just kind of never went there in my mind. But I guess if it is true, and we don't know that it is true, but you know, we have the scene where Kylo reveals to Rey who her parents are, which Rey says she's known the whole time, but like they say that they're nobody, right? Like they're nobody important. They're peasants. Yeah. I don't know that. Do you think Kylo is telling the truth?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think this might be a thing where I'm upset if he's not, because I like the idea that her parents are nobody. She's not a Skywalker. She's not a Solo. You know, like, and that anybody, and I think this actually ties into the very last scene of the film, where the little boy from the casino planet, which we'll get to, but runs out and looks up into the sky, and he's dreaming of becoming a Jedi. It's no longer just for royalty, essentially, you know?
Yeah, so you don't have to be born into it anymore. And it also plays into the whole idea of the balance, like that if there's extreme dark, the Force is going to balance it with light somewhere, and it might be just some random girl on a desert planet who had like parents who were nobody, and I think that's very cool because it doesn't feel like okay the Jedi powers are going to end with the Skywalkers, right? Which it seems like maybe the First Order thinks that it will, and that was always the goal, was like snuff out the Jedis, but I just like the idea that you can't. Yeah. So yeah, I want it to be true too. I'm just gonna believe for that reason.
What do you think of the chase sequence? So you know they have the first battle sequence, and then they're just basically it's a glacial chase. It's the slowest chase, and they don't have enough fuel to do another light jump, or they have enough fuel to do one jump, and if they do that jump, they won't have any fuel, and because they're able to follow them through hyperspace, they can't do another one, and so they're just kind of going on this really slow chase sequence. What did you think of that sequence, like the Poe Dameron sequence in the film?
I mean, I think it's interesting. It gives this sense of like impending doom, like right behind you. Like it's not a fast chase, but the threat is always right there. Like they're just out of reach of the laser fire to where it can actually like harm and get through their shields. And so anything that goes wrong, any like hiccup where they slow down or anything that causes them to slow down, not be able to move anymore, they're going to be done like that. So it's like, it's pretty intense. And I liked it as sort of like a ticking time bomb element to the plot.
I don't remember, or I don't recall, why exactly couldn't the First Order ship speed up and get closer?
I think they're just a lot bigger.
So they could just match...
They're bigger and slower. Okay. Like they're bigger and slower than this, because the Resistance ship that everyone was on, Poe and Princess Leia and all that, was a smaller ship. They had those big like dreadnought ships and Star Destroyers, which are slower.
Okay. Yeah, I liked it. What did you think about the rebellion within the rebellion? Poe Dameron being upset about. Oh, well, actually, so before this, I wanted to go. What did you think about the Leia crazy force powers? So she's out in space. Did you think she was dead?
Yeah, I thought that. Yeah, so Kylo comes out and he fires his missiles into like the cockpit of the ship that Leia's in, and it explodes. And I thought, yeah, this is Leia's time. It's like Kylo's going to also kill his mother, which, oh no, he doesn't shoot, right?
Someone else does.
Yeah, he's about to shoot, and then he pulls his thumb off the button, and then his like people around him shoot the missiles and blow it up. I did think that she was going to die. Like, I thought that would be the end, especially
since Carrie Fisher.
Since Carrie Fisher, passed away. I thought, well, this is like the perfect place to like bring her out on. It's a little weird seeing her frozen and dead, but then she starts moving and like floats herself, basically flies back.
That's probably something we haven't seen people use.
It is and it isn't. I think it's an extension of things like their force jump abilities, like where they can like jump and do like a backflip and land on something like 40 feet above them. Yeah.
It was interesting. I didn't have a problem with it or anything like that, but it was just an interesting.
I didn't either. I was just kind of, okay, well, let's see where we go from here and what happens. Because I guess I expected them to, kill off Princess Leia at some point and like have her character die. And that may be something that has been out there, known that Carrie Fisher or Princess Leia doesn't die in the film. But I really like avoid spoilers.
Yeah, I didn't
super
know
hard when it comes to Star Wars and films that I'm already excited about. Like, I really only look up information and watch trailers on films that I need to decide whether or not I want to see them.
Right.
So like when something like Star Wars, like I'm already sold, and or if it's like a director that I'm into, if like Paul Thomas Anderson has a new film, like I don't necessarily need to watch the trailer to know that I want to go see it. Right. So I avoid all those things. I figured she was going to die at some point. And so I was like, okay, well, I guess we're going to get another scene where we have that emotion of like, she's about to die, which, cause that was, it was emotional for me. I don't know about for you, like that whole build up to like that explosion.
I did not expect, I thought she was dead. And when the explosion happens and she gets sucked out into I was like, my jaw dropped because I expected her to die, but I don't know. It's surprising to me. There's several moments in this movie where I was just, whoa, I can't believe that just happened.
So I guess back to your question, the resistance, the rebellion within the resistance. More conflict is generally good. I'm okay with it. And
why didn't what is her name? Laura Dern. Why didn't she just tell Poe Dameron that the plan?
Yeah, I had that thought too. Like he's trying to figure out what we're doing. He thinks they're not doing anything except just driving until they're going to hit like a certain death, basically, and there's no plan. My only thought on that was that they didn't know how they were being tracked through light speed, because that's supposed to be impossible to track a ship through light speed, right? So what I think might have been the theory is that somebody on the ship is a traitor, maybe, and like giving information.
I thought they knew that one ship could track them through light speed.
Well, so Finn and
they didn't know which ship it was, though?
Well, so the people who figure out that like the way that they tracked them was through like a regular tracker, just like souped up so they could stop it. That was Finn and the girl Rose. They put it together, but like it wasn't like the top brass like commanders putting it together. I think when it happened, they were all like, well, how did they track us through light speed? That's impossible. And so I think they're still functioning under that assumption, and so they're kind of keeping the details of their plans on like a need to know basis, and probably keeping it like relatively unknown so that plan can't get out, because the whole plan relies on the Empire not knowing that their escape ships are going out because they're too small to track. Right. And so if someone knows who can tell the Empire, then they're definitely all dead.
Okay, that makes sense. I think it's a little bit plot driven that she doesn't tell him, because you have to have Poe Dameron do something, and so it's a little bit of a character withholding information where it'd be better if they just, anyways.
Yeah, and why there's no line in the film or no conversation that doesn't involve Poe, or even if it does involve Poe, or like they're talking, even if somebody had said like, oh, we think there's a traitor on the ship, or we think that that's somehow getting information to track us, like if there's maybe a bit more emphasis on that, we might not have that question. I don't know that it's a bad thing that we have that question, because I do like having to fill in my own gaps sometimes.
Okay, so the next part I want to talk about, and I think this is probably where most of my quibbles come in, the
casino planet,
Finn and Rose storyline.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing that I've seen complaints about, and I don't know that I have a complaint about the two of them, but I do have some issues, like plot-wise, with the whole story of them having to go to this casino planet to get this code breaker. So, I mean, to set it up, they Finn and Rose come up with this plan and realization that they're tracking him through a normal tracker through Lightspeed. If they can get into the Empire ship that has the tracker on it, get into the place of the tracker, Rose has the technological know-how to shut it down for long enough for them to jump to Lightspeed. And if they jump to Lightspeed while the tracker's disabled, they won't be able to track him.
Right.
So the problem is that they need help breaking into the ship and breaking into the area, right? And so they talk to the woman from Force Awakens, like the little short orange lady with like glasses.
Lupita Nyong'o.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah, that's the actress's name, obviously, who's playing her. I don't remember the character's name. But she makes this big deal about, like, I can only think of one person who could actually pull that job off, and you have to go to this casino planet to get him. And she tells him, like, this person is going to have, like, a little red flower on their lapel, like a little pin, right? Well, long story short, they get there, they see this person, and as they're about to get to him, they get arrested, Finn and Rose, and they're thrown in jail. And,
by the way, the gambler that they were supposed to find, that was Justin Theroux.
It's Justin Theroux, which to me was immediately recognizable. Some people didn't recognize him.
Yeah. Well, Leftovers, I love that show, so I know.
Yeah, Leftovers is great. Mulholland Drive.
Yeah.
He's in a lot of things.
I was so excited, too. I was like, Justin Theroux is going to be the code breaker. And then, no.
Yeah, I wonder if they're going to bring him back. I would guess probably not. They just put him in there for, like... Yeah, it's just I think it's actually a smart move to put him in there, because you're like, oh, it's Justin Theroux. Like, obviously, he's a recognizable person. And I guess that leads you to believe that, like, oh, they're going to get him somehow, right. which they don't. Like, and this is where my issue really comes in, is that they get thrown in jail, and they run into Benicio del Toro in jail, who's the only other person in their jail cell, and that guy also happens to be an insanely good code breaker who can get them into the ship, when, like, previously there was the big deal, is like, we have to travel to a planet because there's only one person who can do it.
Yeah, I thought that maybe there was some sort of switcheroo where they got the right guy, but maybe not. Maybe just
I thought that too, but then I watched the credits, and Justin Theroux is credited as the master code breaker.
Oh, really?
Right, which doesn't necessarily mean that that's true, but, like, it's confusing. And to me, I thought, like, you can solve that problem pretty easily by having Benicio del Toro say that he lost, like, everything to some guy, like, in a card game, like, including his little pin, and then it turns out Benicio del Toro is the master code breaker. I think that's a bit of a cleaner solution. It's a little bit less of, like, just by sheer coincidence, the heroes solve their problem, which I'm not a fan of.
I wasn't really a big fan of the casino sequence very much. Like, the planet, it felt like such a diversion from the main storyline. They're, like, being chased. Like, if they had just been able to get on the Star Destroyer and and then like had to run into problems, or Captain Phasma there. That would have been better. But like they're in this, like they're being chased, and then they like stop everything and go to another planet. And I really didn't like the sequence where they were on those animals. You know,
yeah.
I guess maybe they had to go there to show that like these little kids. But other than like, I think you could find another way to do that. That's my biggest part of the movie that I didn't like very much. But I think the rest of it makes up for it.
Yeah, it's kind of this halt in the action of like, well, we got to wait for this to happen before we can get back to like, you know, the story that's really interesting. And again, I can't get on board with like coincidences fixing your character's problems. Like even when they've failed, but then they just get the reward of like mission accomplished anyways, right?
Yeah, they didn't really do anything though. Like that whole mission is completely pointless by the end of the movie because. Yeah, by the end of the movie, Laura Dern's character has revealed her plan, and they make it to Crate, and nothing that Rose and Finn did means anything.
Yeah. So I guess it's a bit of a waste of time, but
it actually hurts the rebellion more because Benicio del Toro gives away the secret of what's happening. And they start taking out the rebellion.
So before the Resistance actually make it down to the planet, we have Kylo and Rey meet up, right? Like Rey leaves the planet and she comes.
Yeah, she gives a very
to visit Kylo.
Luke-like response to Luke, where she's like, "No, I can turn him to the light. I must go." And you know, like very Empire Strikes Back. And she takes off and goes to see Kylo. Yeah,
so then we get the Return of the Jedi sort of scene where we've got the Emperor / Snoke, and then you have the I guess like Sith Lord Darth Vader / Kylo, and then Rey / Luke, right? So we had that whole big standoff, which was pretty great. Like I thought that whole sequence was really intense, and you really weren't sure what anyone was going to do at that point.
Right. I really like that sequence. That standoff, and Snoke's telling them that he's the one that made the connection between the two of them, that he's been manipulating Rey, and so then he puts Rey on her knees and is asking Kylo to kill her, and Kylo uses the Force and slices Snoke in half.
Yeah, did your audience cheer when that happened?
No, I wasn't a very quiet, docile audience.
Yeah.
They did cheer when Kylo kills the guy by turning on the lightsaber, and it goes through the other guy's head.
Yeah.
But I think it's such a surprise. You know, were you expecting that?
Yeah, because Snoke is built up to be like the Emperor type figure in this one, and you think that he's going to be around, and like the final film of the trilogy will climax with him, and so to have him dead already was definitely a surprise. And I thought that fight scene looked amazing, like with like the whole red background, and eventually it catches on fire, and it's like burning around them.
The dance that they do, like where they're on the same side now and they're fighting him, that was really awesome.
I liked in the scene too that like immediately we realized kind of that Rey has no chance against either one of them, right? Like in Return of the Jedi, like Luke is a master, and you think like, oh, if he really goes after him, and like he might stand a chance against Vader, he might stand a chance against the Emperor.
Not both at the same time, though.
Not both at the same time, but it's clear that like Rey's just in over her head completely, and I like that aspect of it. That like, well, she's not gonna turn anything around. Like,
well, she could maybe switch. Kylo Ren. Do you think Kylo Ren was ever tempted to switch sides? Or do you think?
I think so. I mean, we've seen that conflict from him. But I do think in his mind, I guess it's he kills Snoke and so that he can rule.
I think, Well, yeah, and I'm not sure exactly what that means to him. Like, if he's ruling, like he wanted Rey, of course, to join him. So, is that we're just gonna rule, or is it gonna be a dark rule, or is it gonna be a light rule if they rule together? I think it's a dark one because he's not saving the friends. Because at this point, they're killing the rebellion one ship at a time.
Yeah, I think he didn't like what Snoke was doing, really. Like, I don't think he liked the idea of, like, why do I have to kill Rey?
He liked Rey better than he liked Snoke.
Yeah, because she's powerful. We can be powerful together and run the galaxy.
Is that, or is it just the whole Sith thing, right? So there's always just two. You kill your master, like, and then you can take on another one. So maybe it's
maybe it is that. It's interesting. The last thing that happens before the Resistance gets down to the planet is the light speed thing with Laura Dern, where everyone gets on the ships and are leaving, and Laura Dern's left to like pilot the ship, and she turns the ship around and goes into light speed, like directly aimed at like the giant Imperial ships, which was really amazing. I looked over at my friend that I was with, one of them, and like he was just like leaned forward, like a jaw dropped. I've never seen someone's like jaw drop so hard or for so long as I did like at that moment. It was really cool.
Yeah. It was.
And is it not like the payoff of something you've been imagining for years of like watching Star Wars and different things where like things go to light speed?
Into the other thing?
Yeah, you imagine like what would it look like if you did crash into something at light speed?
Right.
So it was just like, it was a really nice payoff for me. I was excited.
Yeah. I liked it quite a bit, the Laura Dern sacrifice. Although I liked Laura Dern, I wish could be in another. Maybe they'll make the Laura Dern story.
Maybe so, yeah. I can't remember her name, but it was a really cool like turn from her too, because she was kind of unlikable because she's not telling anyone what they're doing. Yeah. Was supposedly this great commander, but you're like, what is she doing? She's like, she's not even doing anything. So I don't know. I liked that turn.
Yeah,
and that whole last moment.
So my favorite part is that last sequence, or I wouldn't say the last sequence, but the planet, the battle on the planet.
Yeah, and I think this whole section is where I really start to get into that like 10 out of 10 high point section. It's really good. It's basically this wounded part of the Resistance, what's left after so many of their ships has been picked off, and they bunker down in this mountain with like a big giant blast door, and the Empire comes after them. And
basically they're about to be finished off. That's how skeletal they are. Like this is the last stand of the rebellion.
Yeah.
Like that's how bad off it is.
Yeah. And the thing that I thought was the whole genius touch of this whole ending sequence that really gives it that like 10 out of 10 feel for me was the ground, right?
Yeah,
like,
that was pretty awesome.
It was snowy, and then I guess it was pure
salt.
White.
Salt was on top of. It was a salt planet.
This is a salt planet. So when the snow gets
salt
carried away, we see it was salt.
Yeah,
I thought it was snow.
Salt was on top. Yeah, and then.
Okay, I see. I thought you were saying the red was salt.
No. The top layer was salt, and then underneath that was the red.
Was red dirt?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, when the salt would get moved away,
very technical.
It would reveal red underneath it. So when like someone would take a step, like you'd have a red footprint underneath it. And the genius of this was like throughout that whole battle, when like ships are blown up and like their paths are being taken or shots hit the ground, it's leaving like red everywhere, right? So you get the bloodiest looking scene in all of Star Wars history, and you get a real sense of like the blood and the sacrifice in that battle and the death without like having to go in that like R-rated violence territory, right? Which I don't know, I thought that was amazing. Like there's like a wide shot I think towards the end of like it's just red everywhere.
Right. Yeah, and they had it set up so that like they found these old ships. they're going to use to attack the. Because they have of course, a big giant gun that they're going to use.
Get through the blast door, of course.
And they're going to use these ships to get into it and or to destroy it. And of course, the ships all have they kind of have to be connected to the ground a little bit. They're
for stabilization.
Yeah, and so it's. As they drive, it's just this streak of red dust behind them. That was such an amazing visual shot.
Yeah, and I kind of put it as a metaphor for the resistance going out of them, but they're bleeding, they're hurt, they're trailing blood behind them. So they would think of it like the wounded hero coming back, and he's got a trail of blood coming out of his leg because he's been shot or something. You know? But going after him for one last big fight.
Right.
Just genius. And then the other genius touch of this comes when Luke shows up, right? And he shows up and he's like, okay, I got to take on Kylo Ren. So we get this whole Luke versus Kylo battle on this planet. And when they start fighting, Luke is dodging Kylo's lightsaber blows, right? And it's...
Wait, we got to get to... There's two things. It's a really great moment with Luke and Leia.
This is our first time we have a scene of Luke and Leia.
Yeah, so we haven't seen them together since Return of the Jedi, and I really like that moment, as he walks by her and walks out the door. Oh, the other moment that I really enjoyed was Luke walks out and is just standing there. It's red at this point, and Kylo's aim every gun we have at him, and so it's just this barrage of essentially he's going to be disintegrated, and then so there's this giant red dust cloud, and Luke Skywalker walks out of the dust, and he does this. He brushes the dust off of his shoulder, it's no thing. It was pretty awesome.
It was awesome. That's actually the other example I can think of where the humor in the film got kind of weird to me and just slightly out of place. There was a few other examples I'm struggling to think of them, but this one is the best example I think of this modern sense of humor kind of coming into the Star Wars world, and it didn't quite work for me. It felt a little bit anachronistic, right? It just felt out of place, a humor that's from now.
Yeah, I didn't
necessarily... in a galaxy a lot far away, a long time ago.
I took it more as a samurai thing almost, just I didn't necessarily think of it as modern, but
it is. And maybe it's just me, and that didn't land for me. That moment, it was kind of lame to me. Yeah. But what I did enjoy finally seeing Luke and Leia get to interact, and I enjoyed her joke. She has that joke when they first see each other.
What'd she say?
She's I know what you're gonna say, and the implication is that she knows he's gonna apologize for Kylo and everything that's happened, and she says I know what you're gonna say. I have changed my hair, which is a pretty good. I don't know. I enjoyed that. It was one of the moments where they inserted humor, because there was a lot of parts in the film where they undercut these moments that were kind of serious or dark with these jokes to kind of lighten the mood. And sometimes they worked for me. Sometimes I wanted to stay in that moment of darkness.
A little bit longer.
This one, I'm glad it wasn't just it worked for me in that particular moment.
Yeah. Okay, so now we can get to Kylo and them facing off.
Yeah. So they are both down on the floor of the planet. Kylo's come down out of his ship, and they have this big lightsaber duel, or they're really about to, right? Mm-hmm. And Luke just is basically dodging his lightsaber blows, and it really feels like he's just showing up Kylo completely and making him look like a big idiot, right? And which I thought was great. I really enjoyed that. But as I was watching the other place where the red dirt on the planet pays off really big is that if you're watching Luke's feet, and there's a couple of shots specifically on Luke's feet as he's moving around, he's not disturbing
Right.
the salt. Like, he's not leaving the red footprints like Kylo and everybody else and everything else on the planet is. Which was kind of a genius touch. It's one of those, like, it gives you a little clue as to what's going on. Mm-hmm. I noticed it. I think most of the other people that I watched it with didn't notice that happening.
I didn't. Until I think I read an article or something afterwards. And I actually don't remember. So they never touched. Like, their lightsabers never touched. Nothing. You know, like, I don't remember him dodging everything. I thought they had a battle. I mean, it's just because I'm watching and I'm not necessarily paying attention that they're not touching. So it's definitely going to be, I'm going to have to go watch it again.
Yeah, it gives you that repeat watchability, I guess. Mm-hmm. But it all makes sense in the end because as we find out, like, Kylo eventually strikes through Luke, but Luke is fine.
Yeah.
And we find out that he's just like doing this sort of astral projection. Well, so even when I did see the foot thing where, like, oh, he's not leaving a footprint. That's weird. In my mind, I sort of thought, like, he's so at one with the Force and, like, so smooth in his movements that, like, he's not really disturbing the ground or something like that. Like, that's how, like, fleet of foot he is, really. It's kind of, I took it at first. It all made sense once it came up, but no, I didn't figure it out. I was like...
Did you think he died?
No, I knew. I was like, oh, he's survived the blaster.
Yeah.
Those big blasters. Like, I feel like he's gonna like...
I thought that he could go out Obi-Wan Kenobi style where, you know, he's like fighting and then he just kind of, you know, lets himself be killed. But yeah, so that's what I thought was happening. But it is not.
Yeah, you thought, like, you think, like, he's going to disappear just like Obi-Wan. Because he gives the last line that Obi-Wan says before he dies. Like, if you strike me down now, I'll come back more powerful than you can imagine.
He doesn't actually say that. He says, if you kill me now in hate, like your father, I'll never leave you. Or something along those lines. Like, if you... Basically, he says...
Obi-Wan doesn't actually say that? Or Luke
says Obi-Wan says it. Luke doesn't say it. He says, if you strike me down now in hate, I will always be with you.
Yeah. But I guess it's
like your father.
Similar line.
Similar, but different. I'm glad he did. I'm glad it wasn't the exact same.
Yeah, for sure. But I guess they had the same moment, I guess. Yeah. And I guess at that point I thought, okay, he's going to disappear. And maybe that explains, like, the foot thing, right? Is that maybe in doing that, you're not quite there. Because I guess I never really understood the whole disappearing body thing.
Yeah, that's all outside of the movies is where that comes in. So the only people that can do it is Obi-Wan, Yoda, and apparently Anakin Skywalker. So... Otherwise, we'd have a bunch of Jedis. Well, because Anakin at the end of...
Jedi?
Yeah. Otherwise, every Jedi would be running around as a Force ghost. You just have...
Oh, yeah.
So those are the only three. And Qui-Gon Jinn, like, invented it type of thing. And this has to do with, like, if you ever watch Clone Wars, that's where that comes from. Not that I watch Clone Wars. I haven't done that, of course.
Sure.
That'd be too nerdy.
If you say so.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so it turns out that Luke is projecting himself, and that's why the lasers never hurt him, Kylo's lightsaber never hurts him, but once he's done fighting him, Luke does disappear, just like Obi-Wan, and his Jedi cloak collapses.
He was projecting from the island where they met before.
I don't know if you've heard this, but there's theories going around that they never intended to kill Luke, and it's something they decided to do in post.
I have not read that.
Yeah, that's the theory, is that they basically just did the whole, like, cloak collapsing and him disappearing to kill him off afterwards, and that it was never part of the story. It was just supposed to be, like, he was supposed to, like, survive beyond that.
Possible. From what I understand, this movie was originally, like, 3 hours long. Or, you know, it was a half hour to 45 minutes longer. And I think all those things will be included on the DVD. I read Rian Johnson saying that. So at some point we're going to get to see the deleted scenes and see what...
I think that the theory doesn't make sense because, you know, he does have that final moment of, like, that Obi-Wan-esque line. Yeah. And if you're going to put that sort of line in there, and him saying it, like, I feel like you don't put that line in there and then have him live.
Yeah. Unless the only reason I could see why they would do that in post is if J.J. Abrams was like, okay, I'm going to do this movie, or Colin Trevorrow, who was supposed to direct the third one, came up and was like, hey, my idea for this next story or it only works if Luke is already dead. So can we figure out a way to do that?
Yeah, I think part of the theory is too that like Luke's been not perfect on like his press tours. Like he said something
right.
that has like been a little controversial.
So he's a little upset.
And so they're thinking like, let's just kill him off so we don't have to deal with him anymore.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely. I don't think that's. A lot of people are upset because he didn't die. Like, you know, in some of the extended universe stuff, like he brings an entire Star Destroyer down just by himself. We never really get to see Luke Skywalker, uber Jedi, you know, like doing all sorts of crazy stuff. How do you feel like that was a cool way to go out?
I mean, him doing the whole astral projection thing is something we've never seen before, and is a bit of an uber Jedi thing to me.
Yeah.
If you ask me, I mean, he saves the Resistance.
Yeah, he gives them enough time to escape.
Yeah. Yeah, he's the only reason that they didn't all just die.
Right.
Right. And to me, that's good enough. I don't need him to use super crazy, like special effect, cool force powers where he like force lightning something out of existence, or like you said, brings down a Star Destroyer with the force or anything like that. Yeah. That's maybe a bit much.
I like a peaceful Luke just disappearing, you know, like I like that. And he was a badass, you know, like he did his badass thing with the astral projection, so I'm okay with that.
Yeah. And then I guess the other thing that I wanted to talk about, the very last image we get with this whole idea that the Force balances itself and will have light rise up when there's extreme darkness. Mm-hmm. We end on the image of the kid from the casino planet picking up a broom. And I didn't notice this, but people said that he uses the Force to pick up the broom. I
didn't see that. If he did,
apparently it happened. Apparently he doesn't actually like reach down and grab up the broom like it's the Force.
How did I miss that?
I don't know. I missed it too. so I'll have to go back and watch for that. But yeah, so the idea is that like a whole new generation of people are going to come up and rise. So I don't know. What did you think of that ending?
That's what Rian Johnson's new trilogy is going to be, like Attack of the Broom Boy. Return of the Broom Boy.
Just following that kid entirely.
Yeah.
That's okay. I mean, do you like that ending of?
It was an interesting. I like that. The thing I like about this movie that a lot of these movies that I did not expect to get out of it is we got, well, depending on where you stand, we got all the answers, and there's not a giant cliffhanger. I mean, the cliffhanger is, how do the rebels survive? You know,
yeah,
and
how does
stuff
the
like
resistance
that.
rise up? Do they get the first
Right.
order? But no.
But for the most
big,
part,
like, character frozen in carbonite.
Yeah, there's no no cliffhanger. You know, and I really like that, and I like the idea of everybody being able to use the Force, and like the little kid looking up to the sky, and it's like hope, right?
Yeah, it's a very hopeful ending, which is not like Empire Strikes Back.
Right. Although, I think this has it. I mean, the movie ends, the rebellion is in tatters. You know, like, there's basically, they are barely alive. No one answered their distress call. No planets want to help.
Yeah, and rather than, like, the movie ending on that down note, though, like it goes that one step further, and we end on like kind of the upturn, where where things might start to rise again.
It's almost like look, things may be dark now, but don't worry, you know, things will be okay, type of thing. You know, like there's always hope. Anyways, I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, did you think about Arrested Development at all during that last scene? Like when he picked up the broom and he started walking off, I started to have little images of George Michael doing the Star Wars Kid, like his videotape that keeps surfacing of him in his garage, like
no, I did not think of that,
slinging the broom around. That's all I could think of when that was happening, and I think somewhere out there pretty soon that's going to end up on YouTube. It's going to be that last like kid going and grabbing the broom, and then it's going to cut to George Michael in there. Somebody needs to do that.
Yeah.
I don't have a copy of The Last Jedi to edit with, or I would do it. But maybe if no one's done it by the time the Blu-ray comes out, I can do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, any final
good movie
thoughts on The Last Jedi? I think it's good. I think if you're a Star Wars fan, you should watch it, and you'll probably like it. I think if you just listen to this whole thing and you haven't seen it yet, sorry.
You knew what was happening.
But I guess there's a lot of division about it, a lot of like hate towards it on certain things, and I don't know. I just appreciate the fact that it took risks and it was willing to fail on some things. Like that light speed thing was really intense and could have just fallen flat on its face and people wouldn't accept it. Same with the astral projection thing. Mm-hmm. Like people could turn against that and think like that's stupid, but they took risks, right? And I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
I like it.
All right, so for our last segment, we're going to do the top 3 things we want to see in the next Star Wars.
That's right. So I guess just, I don't know. We kind of left this open to interpretation. So I don't know if it's going to be like plot points or characters or whatever. So yeah, do you want to go first, Chris?
Yeah. What I want to see, or what I want to know, I guess, in the next movie, is how does the Rebel Alliance survive this? Like, how do they get better? What happens with Carrie Fisher? Like, how does
that's like 2 things.
I mean, that's kind of the same because the Rebel Alliance. How does the Rebel Alliance survive without Leia? And how do they grow from here? So I would like
the rise of the Resistance, basically.
Yeah.
How they recover.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're probably going to we'll start like 2 years down the road. Like I think, but
where they've recovered and recruited some people.
Yeah.
So you don't think we're going to get like the recruitment part of the movie where it's like they're going around trying to rally new leaders, like the.
I think that'll be a TV show that they like a animated series in between.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I guess going off of that, like, I want to see some sort of like send off for Leia and Carrie Fisher. Like, it doesn't have to be huge. It doesn't have to be like this massive scene. Like, I don't necessarily need to see like the scene where she does die. I just want that moment, that like finality with Leia. Yeah. I think that would be
and we've gotten it for
really emotional.
Yeah, and we've gotten it for the other 3. The other main 3. I think. So if it's just in the opening crawl, like General Leia has died! ! Or whatever. Like if that's all there is, will you be upset?
I think so. I think if it's that, or if it's some sort of line like.
I wish General Leia was here.
yeah. Or, since Leia died, blah, 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 blah. Like, even if it's like it's in the opening crawl and then we open on like her funeral.
Yeah, that would be.
I would be okay with that. Or if there's some sort of monument to her, or like there's some sort of last message that Leia recorded and it's just her voice with like an image of her or something. I don't know. Just, I don't know that they could do that. Like fake her voice. Maybe that'd be harder than faking an image of her. Maybe they can do like take clips of her previous thing. I don't know. It could be really bad. I don't know. I want them to do it well, but I don't want to just have a throwaway line of like, well, Princess Leia is dead now.
Yeah.
I'd like to see something.
Yeah, I think some kind of send off would be good. Something more than just a monument, or like if there is just a monument. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah.
All right. My second one is Luke as a Force ghost. That's what I want to see. Like Luke helping out. Like Luke, Yoda. I imagine we're going to see all 4 Force ghosts in the next movie. Yeah. Which will be really cool. Because even if it's just at the very end of the movie, but I think we'll at least get Yoda and Luke for sure. So I'm excited to see that and see how that plays out.
Yeah, would you be forcing an Anakin ghost that was Hayden Christensen? Because they did that in some version of it. They replaced
in Return of the Jedi.
They replaced the original Force ghost of Vader with Hayden Christensen. Would that offend you?
You know, if I had liked the prequels more, it wouldn't offend me as much. But because I want to forget the prequels, the prequels, yeah, Freudian slip, I guess. It's just a constant reminder. I think really that's the only choice we have, though. Was it Obi-Wan? Who's the Obi-Wan ghost? Did they keep the?
I think in one of them they did put Ewan McGregor in instead of Alec Guinness.
I don't remember.
I prefer Alec Guinness.
I mean, I like Alec Guinness. Ewan McGregor's pretty awesome too, but I think Ewan McGregor would be the way to go since Alec Guinness is long gone. So, anyways, what's your second one?
My second one is the explanation of the whole like force connection and them like physically having interaction with each other, like the thing with the rain. Mm-hmm. I want something to come out of that, something more. I did have the thought that that may be why Luke actually died, is because there is that physical connection during the astral projection. Like when Kylo strikes through him, maybe it does actually have some sort of effect on him and cause him to, die / disappear in the end. But it doesn't really make sense when you factor in the fact that he was shot with a bunch of lasers. Yeah,
and I think they're a little bit of two different things, right? Because they can actually touch in the mind meld, whereas they can't touch.
That's the other reason that I think it doesn't work. Yeah. So I want that to like amount to something, because that was huge. Like that was a big moment, and to not have it pay off, like I'm really interested in that. Yeah.
So I don't know if we're going to see any more about the connection or not. Like if that connection sticks around or if it's just going to fade away. All right, mine kind of has to do with that last one too. My last one, Kylo Ren and Rey facing off is actually what I'd like to see.
Yeah.
That's it. Like after the episode or them fighting together in this episode, I just want to see where that relationship goes. Actually, I really enjoyed that in this episode. The other one, I'm going to add one more that just occurred to me, but
sure.
General Hux. How does General Hux survive? After being like Kylo Ren is obviously not a very good person in charge, and so how does
we can go into my third one because that has to do with that.
Okay, go ahead.
My third one, I want to see General Hux is the redhead guy, right? Mm-hmm. I want to see him go down.
Oh, you hate him?
He's kind of weaselly and annoying, and like I think there would be immense satisfaction in seeing him go down with a ship, or like I thought he was going to be force choked out, and I was like, yes, yes.
But now the dynamic changed. So like at the beginning of the movie, you hate him, but like when he's dealing with Poe, he's so funny because he's like got this uppity British. He's like, put me on, and then they like put him on hold, and he's like, what is this? And he gets so upset, like in that weird British way.
He's great when he's like post pretending to not hear him.
Yeah. And then when the dynamic changes, when Kylo Ren becomes top dog, that dynamic changes, it's so fun to watch Kylo Ren and General Hux together. And General Hux trying to figure out how he fits into this thing again.
Like even that moment where like Kylo shouts an order, and then Hux does too. He tries to shout it as well.
And then Kylo like looks at him, or like General Hux. I think Kylo's passed out, and Hux starts to go for the lightsaber, and then he wakes up, or the Force is used on General Hux at the very end. He's like, we can't do that. It's too dangerous, or whatever, and they use the Force on him, and I don't know. I like that dynamic now, so I don't know that I want to see him die.
I like it too, and I'm fine with it being there for like the rest of that film. But like I'm just looking forward to like how that guy dies. I think it'll be really satisfying.
It'll be
and probably intense.
Like Peter Cushing in Episode 4. Leave our ship at the moment of greatest glory. That'll be General Hux. We can't he's just Anyways. All right.
Yeah. Well, I guess that does it for this episode, our first off-week episode. So hopefully you guys enjoyed it, and let us know what you think. And of course, we thank you for listening, and we also want to thank Jake Wagner Russell for doing our intro and outro music. If you want to hear more of his music, you can do so at soundcloud.com/bopscotch. Yeah, and again, if you want to follow us, stay up to date with what we're doing, what movies we're doing next, what we're going to talk about each week, that way you can ask questions if you want us to cover a certain question in the show, or if you want to give us feedback on a show you've listened to, like something we got wrong, something you thought you disagree with, something you agree with, things you like. You can like us on Facebook at facebook.com/casuallycriterion podcast. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at casualcriterion, and you can email us directly at casuallycriterion@gmail.com.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for listening. See you guys next time.
Bye-bye.